I want you to imagine waking up, right, making your coffee, and then sitting down to read J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and not just a chapter. I mean, you sit there and you read all 96,000 words of it.
That is a lot for one morning.
Right. And then tomorrow, you wake up and you do it all over again. And the next day. Every single day. Because according to research, that is actually the equivalent of the 72 gigabytes of information our brains process daily.
72 gigabytes. That is just a massive cognitive load.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this, because with that kind of daily data dump, I mean, it's a miracle we can even form coherent sentences by 5 p.m.
Yeah, exactly.
So our mission for this deep dive today is to really shortcut your path to better personal energy management. We're looking at a healthier workplace, redefined productivity.
Because to process that kind of hardware load without our brains just degrading, we have to admit that our standard way of checking in with ourselves is completely broken.
Totally broken. And we're pulling our insights today from some really fascinating conversations featuring David Coe, the CEO of Calm, and some other top business leaders.
Right, and what's fascinating here is that the default reflex we all have, that whole "how are you" thing, it's the perfect example of that broken system.
Oh, for sure. You hear it a dozen times a day.
Yeah, and the response is almost universally just, "I'm fine." It's basically an automated script. It conveys absolutely zero data about your actual cognitive or emotional state. It's mostly just defensive.
It's the human equivalent of like your check engine light being on, but you just put a piece of black electrical tape over the dashboard.
That is exactly it. You're just ignoring the problem. But David Coe presents a much better framework that actually originated from a friend of his.
Right, the battery analogy.
Yes. So instead of asking her kids, how are you? She started asking them, how's your battery?
Which is such a brilliant shift because it neutralizes all that emotional baggage. I mean, if you ask a teenager how they are, fine is just this protective shield against interrogation.
Exactly. But a battery percentage is just, it's an objective metric. When she asked about their battery, they would suddenly give her this highly actionable data.
Like, I'm at 50%.
Right. I'm at 50% and I need a snack. Or I'm at 25% and I just need everyone to leave me alone. Quantifying the drain removes all those psychological traps we usually fall into.
I always think of this in terms of smartphone settings. You know when your phone is just dying by noon?
Oh, yeah, the worst.
Right. So you go into the battery settings to see what's eating your power. And you usually find like a handful of background apps you haven't even opened in days, just silently chewing through your battery life.
And we all have psychological background apps doing the exact same thing to us.
Exactly. It's not necessarily the meeting you're in right now that's draining you. It's the looming deadline on a completely different project, or some passive-aggressive email you read at 7 a.m.
Yeah, and assigning a numerical value to that drain, it prevents us from swinging wildly between catastrophizing and minimizing.
Because we tend to do that, don't we?
Oh, humans have a terrible habit of it.
Right.
We either scale our stress up to a 10 out of 10 worst case scenario, or we bury it completely at a 0 and say we're fine.
So a battery percentage strips away that defensiveness.
It really does. In the framework Coe discusses, it breaks down into 4 distinct zones. The 75 to 100% zone means you are easily processing that Hobbit-level daily data dump.
You're thriving.
Right. You have the bandwidth to be creative, you're patient, you can actually solve complex problems without snapping at people.
And then the next zone down is what, 50 to 75%?
Exactly. You're still highly functional here, but this is the phase where you really need to start strategizing a recharge.
Which makes sense. I mean, you don't wait until your phone is at 2% to start looking for a charger if you know you have a long day ahead.
But in corporate life, we routinely wait until we are entirely empty. We just push and push.
Which drops us into the 25 to 50% zone.
Right. And from a cognitive perspective, this is where your executive function starts to fray. Your prefrontal cortex.
That's the part responsible for impulse control, right?
Exactly. Impulse control and long-term planning. It basically starts yielding control over to the amygdala, the fear center. Coe argues this is the zone where you absolutely must actively intervene.
So stop the endless litany of Zoom calls.
Yes. Step away from the screen, because at this point, you are no longer doing your best work.
And then you hit the 0 to 25% zone, which is just a hard stop. You are running on fumes.
Complete depletion.
You know what I find really interesting about this framework? It's how our physical battery habits basically mirror our internal energy management.
Oh, how so?
Well, Coe mentions he gets anxious if his electric car drops below 30%. He wants everything fully charged all the time. But we all know people who will casually let their phone drop to 3% and feel completely indifferent about it.
Oh, I'm definitely the latter. I live on the edge with my phone battery.
See, that's the thing. The friction in a lot of workplaces seems to come from like a 90% battery personality managing a 15% battery personality, and neither of them understands the other's threshold.
Yeah, that friction is hugely compounded by a corporate culture that actively punishes us for acknowledging we even have a battery at all.
Right, the whole always-on mentality.
Exactly. As a society, we have erroneously equated schedule density with human value. We harbor this subconscious belief that if our calendar looks like a solid block of Tetris from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., well, we must be indispensable.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here. If checking our battery prevents burnout, why do we still force ourselves to work when we hit 10%? The math just doesn't make sense. If my brain is out of juice, sitting at my desk for another 2 hours isn't going to magically produce a breakthrough.
It absolutely won't.
Yeah.
Ho actually points out that trying to power through work with a depleted battery results in output that is, quote, embarrassingly bad.
Embarrassingly bad. That's harsh but true.
It is. And no amount of caffeine or AI assistance or sheer willpower can reconstruct a thought process when the underlying hardware is actively failing.
Because the neurological reality is that a stressed, depleted mind just defaults to the path of least resistance.
Yes. You make slower, rushed, short-tempered decisions that basically prioritize immediate relief over any long-term strategy.
The illusion of busyness. You feel like you're getting things done, but in reality, you are likely just creating a mess.
A mess that you will have to spend days or even weeks fixing once you finally regain some mental clarity.
Which means taking a time out actually gains you time in the long run.
Exactly, because it prevents the mess in the first place. The sources bring up John Sculley, the former CEO of Apple.
Oh yeah, the chief listening officer thing.
Right. He famously put chief listening officer on his business card, and I mean, at first glance, that sounds like a corporate PR stunt.
Totally sounds like a buzzword.
But if you look at it through the lens of cognitive load, he was deliberately outsourcing the heavy lifting. Instead of burning his own battery trying to dictate every single solution, he preserved his energy to process the data his team brought to him.
He shifted from being the bottleneck to being the processor.
Precisely. And Jack Rowe, the former CEO of Aetna, he echoed a really similar philosophy. He emphasized the absolute necessity of putting yourself into neutral.
Into neutral, like a car.
Yeah, because a high-performance engine cannot run at maximum RPMs indefinitely without seizing up. The human brain is literally no different.
Okay, but wait, let me push back on this a bit because I know what you, the listener, are probably thinking right now. When you're staring down a brutal quarterly goal or your boss is demanding an update by end of day, putting your career into neutral feels incredibly dangerous.
I get that. It feels risky.
Right. The instinct is that if you take your foot off the gas, you fall behind. We are so conditioned to view stress as a motivator.
But that instinct blurs a very critical line. Stress, inherently, is just a biological response to a demand. But we completely lack the nuance to differentiate between the good kind of stress,
Eustress.
right, eustress, and the bad kind, which is distress.
We usually just lump it all under the giant umbrella of work is hard. The sources actually mention a startling statistic. 61% of people feel expected to just get over their stress, push it down, swallow it, and keep hitting those metrics.
Which is a catastrophic strategy for organizational health. David Koch shared a deeply personal story about this exact thing. As a child, he experienced severe anxiety. We're talking a tight chest, shortness of breath, physical sweating.
That's terrifying for a kid.
It is. And his mother, who was an immigrant parent operating with the very best intentions but, limited resources, took him to doctors for physical tests.
Right, to see if it was a heart issue or something.
Exactly. And when all those tests came back clear, she basically told him he just had to power through it. They simply lacked the vocabulary for mental health struggles.
So power through became the default setting because they literally didn't know what else to call it.
Exactly.
But returning to the biology of it, where is the actual boundary between eustress and distress? Because, when a manager drops a massive, tight deadline on my desk, it feels like distress to me, but they probably think they're just challenging me to grow.
Well, the boundary lies in your neurological response and the presence of an exit strategy.
Exit strategy.
Yeah. Eustress, or good stress, triggers a very controlled release of adrenaline and dopamine. It actually sharpens your focus, it enhances memory formation, and it builds resilience.
Think of it like forging steel.
Right. You apply intense heat and pressure with deliberate intention, followed by a very necessary cool-down period. The steel becomes stronger because the stress is purposeful and finite.
So the team shares a clear goal, and crucially, they feel supported while pursuing it. The pressure is high, but they know their manager has their back.
Yes. Distress, on the other hand, just floods your system with cortisol. This happens when the brain perceives a threat with absolutely no clear exit strategy.
So the challenges are just 247, 365 days a year.
Zero support, shifting goalposts, constant ambiguity. Going back to your metaphor, distress isn't forging the steel, it's just throwing the metal into a fire and leaving it there until it completely melts into a puddle.
Wow, yeah, that distinction makes so much sense. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. How does a well-meaning leader, someone who isn't a cartoon villain and genuinely wants their team to succeed, accidentally toss their employees into that fire?
It frequently happens through a phenomenon known as priority stacking. And this is heavily exacerbated by the digital tools we use today.
Priority stacking.
Yeah, so in a physical office, you can physically see if someone's desk is overflowing with files. But in a digital workspace, there is this illusion of infinite scale. Leaders, often completely unconsciously, will assign 5 new, highly urgent tasks to a team without ever formally pausing or removing the previous priorities.
Oh man, I have lived that nightmare. The boss comes in and says, okay, this is our new number 1 priority. But the old number 1 priority is still due on Friday, and nobody is authorized to push the deadline.
And the leader fails to realize how that dynamic cascades down the organizational chart. The executives at the top, they possess a high degree of autonomy. They can delegate, they can shift their schedules, they can just say no.
But middle managers and frontline employees often have almost zero control over their workflows.
Exactly. When leaders stack priorities without removing obstacles, they create an environment where the brain constantly perceives an insurmountable threat. It's a perfect recipe for chronic cortisol overload.
So if priority stacking and a lack of control are the actual diseases causing this distress, telling people to just take a walk or remember to breathe is a laughable cure. It doesn't fix the structural issue at all.
Not even a little bit. And the sources detail how Calm approaches this systemically. They build daily rituals into the workplace to keep the team's batteries charged.
Not just perks like a ping pong table, but actual operational rituals.
Exactly. A ritual implies intentionality and repetition. One of their most fascinating practices is starting their all-hands company meetings with several minutes of complete silent meditation.
Okay, wait. If my boss told our entire remote team to just sit in silence on Zoom for 3 minutes, I guarantee half the team would roll their eyes, turn off your cameras, and start checking Slack on their phones. How do you actually get buy-in for something that feels that, woo-woo to a corporate audience?
You have to explain the cognitive mechanics behind it. The goal isn't spiritual enlightenment, it's cognitive closure.
Cognitive closure. Okay, explain that.
Think about the 5 minutes before a big meeting. Employees are frantically answering emails, finishing up a report, maybe putting out a fire in another department. Their brains literally have a dozen open tabs.
Right.
When you enforce 3 minutes of silence, you are essentially forcing the brain's operating system to close out those background processes. It forces a transition from a reactive state to a receptive state.
Meaning they actually process the information presented in the meeting rather than just staring blankly at a screen.
Exactly.
That completely reframes it. You're not wasting 3 minutes of meeting time. You're optimizing the remaining 57 minutes.
Exactly. And they also tackle what I'd call meeting hygiene. They institute Zoom-free days and actively empower employees to decline meetings that lack an agenda or a clear purpose.
Which is huge for autonomy. And they even push for walking meetings, right? Getting outside and moving physically changes the blood flow, which alters the energy and creativity of a conversation compared to just staring at a grid of faces on a monitor.
Yeah, these rituals aren't just about reducing screen time, they are about actively dismantling the illusion of busyness we discussed earlier. They signal to the organization that thoughtful engagement is valued way over sheer attendance.
They also have a ritual called weekly wins on Fridays, which I thought was a brilliant pivot on traditional metrics.
Oh, I love this one.
Right. Instead of management defining what a win is, like, closing a certain number of tickets or hitting a sales target, they let the employees define what success meant to them that week.
The psychological impact of that is profound. It shifts the dopamine regulation from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation.
Because a win might be something entirely invisible to management, like finally restructuring a messy database or successfully navigating a really difficult conversation with a client.
Yeah, by allowing employees to self-define success, you validate the invisible emotional labor that drains their batteries.
It also builds interpersonal trust. They start Monday meetings by genuinely asking about people's weekends, not as a throwaway pleasantry, but to actually understand who they are working with.
The philosophy there is that you spend a third of your life with these people. If you don't connect with them as humans, the work will absolutely suffer.
This kind of forces us to reevaluate our whole definition of productivity. We have a tendency to view missed deadlines or sloppy work as a time management failure or a skill deficit.
But the sources make a really compelling argument that a chronic lack of productivity often actually stems from a lack of trust.
Yeah, because in a low-trust environment, people gatekeep information. They bottleneck processes to protect their own territory, and they are terrified of taking creative risks because they fear being penalized.
But when trust is high, all that friction just disappears. Interpersonal connection isn't a soft HR initiative. It is literally the ultimate efficiency tool.
To build that kind of trust, though, the vulnerability really has to start at the top. I mean, if the CEO acts like an infallible robot, the entire management team will pretend to be robots too.
Oh, 100%. David Coe talked about how he had to actively unlearn his corporate conditioning to become vulnerable. He started sharing his own coping mechanisms with the entire company.
Like what?
Well, talking about how he used to smoke in stairwells as a young banker to handle the crushing stress, or how he still struggles with stress-eating ice cream and fries when the pressure gets way too high.
By modeling that behavior, he single-handedly dismantled the stigma. When the CEO admits they don't have it all figured out, it grants tacit permission for everyone else to be honest about their own cognitive load.
It creates psychological safety. And when a team feels psychologically safe, they don't waste 20% of their daily battery just pretending to be perfect. They pour that energy into the actual work.
Which directly leads into the story about the offsite strategy meeting. A CEO goes to this massive company retreat, and instead of standing at the podium dictating the 3-year plan from on high, he flips the script completely.
He asks the employees to formulate the company's strategy.
It is a radical departure from traditional top-down management, because top-down assumes the executives hold all the answers.
Right, and he compared it to managing a sports team. You spend millions of dollars scouting, drafting, and training these incredibly talented players, but then you try to micromanage every step they take on the court.
At some point, you have to pass them the ball and trust them to shoot.
Exactly. And the strategy the employees developed was far superior to anything the executive team could have drafted in isolation.
Why? Because the employees were the ones interacting with the software, talking to the customers, seeing the daily inefficiencies. They had the ground truth data.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, he essentially outsourced the strategic thinking to the most accurate data set available. The overarching theme connecting all of these practices, the enforced silence, the self-defined weekly wins, the executive vulnerability and delegating strategy, it's all about the restoration of agency.
Giving people the steering wheel instead of just dragging them along for the ride.
Precisely. If a company does not provide the physical and cultural architecture, whether that's stipends for therapy, genuinely flexible time off, or simply a safe space to admit you are at 15% battery, employees literally lack a vehicle to manage their mental health.
You cannot demand that your workforce process 72 gigabytes of cognitive load a day without providing the infrastructure to support that bandwidth.
It just won't work.
So what does this all mean? Let's pull all these threads together. We started by looking at how broken our standard check-ins are and how adopting the battery analogy gives us neutral, actionable data on our internal energy.
Right. And we unpack that dangerous illusion of busyness, where priority stacking and a lack of exit strategies flood our brains with cortisol, turning what should be healthy eustress into toxic distress.
And we explored how combating that distress requires moving way beyond platitudes. It demands structural rituals, from how we conduct our meetings to how we define success, that foster psychological safety and restore a sense of control to the individual.
It is really about shifting from a mindset of just powering through your week to intentionally powering up.
I love that, powering up. And I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to mull over. Think about your technology one last time. You would never try to jam a thick, clunky laptop power cord into a delicate smartphone.
No, it wouldn't fit. And if you forced it, you would destroy the hardware.
Because the voltage requirements and the connection points are entirely different. Well, human beings operate the exact same way. There is no universal charger. What revitalizes your coworker might completely exhaust you.
That is so true.
For one person on your team, a full recharge might mean 5 days of intense, heavy lifting exercise at the gym. That physical exertion clears their mental tabs. But for someone else, maybe for you, a recharge requires a completely unplugged weekend, zero social obligations, reading a physical book, and absolutely no screens allowed in the bedroom.
We all require a custom voltage to restore our executive function.
So the question you need to ask yourself today isn't just what is my battery level, it's this. When your personal battery hits 10%, do you know exactly what your specific custom charger looks like? Do you know what activities actually restore your cognitive bandwidth, rather than just providing mindless distraction? Figure out what your charger is today, before your screen goes dark.